Welcome to Brookfield Perspectives. Today we have another edition of Deal Debrief, where we get the download on recent transactions from the people who put them together. On this episode, Jeh Vevaina and Ed Bayford from our Renewable Power and Transition Group take us deeper into one of the biggest deals ever done in their sector, the acquisition of Neoen, one of the leading developers and operators of renewable power globally. Jeh, Ed, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here as well.
Thank you for having us.
Jeh, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about your background and what you do at Brookfield.
I'm a managing partner at Brookfield and the global chief investment officer for Brookfield's Renewable Power and Transition Group. I've been with Brookfield for more than 10 years. I've had investment and asset management roles, and I'm currently based in Toronto.
Great. Ed, what about you?
Hello, my name is Ed Bayford. I'm a VP within the investments team of our Renewable Power and Transition Group. I'm based here in London and was part of the team that led and coordinated our acquisition of Neoen recently. It has been a milestone transaction for us. Delighted to be discussing it further today.
Yeah, let's dive right into that. So the acquisition of Neoen is one of the largest renewable deals that Brookfield has ever done. So Ed, it would be great for you to tell us a little bit about the company and really just about the transaction overall.
Sure. So as you alluded to, Neoen is a global developer and operator of renewables, in particular solar, onshore wind, and battery energy storage. The company is headquartered in France and was publicly listed since its IPO in 2018. At Brookfield, we had tracked the company for many years, and we were always impressed, not only by the pace, but even more importantly, the discipline and the profitability of its growth. Now, geographically, Neoen is already a market leader in France, Australia, and the Nordics, and is scaling quickly in several very interesting adjacent power markets around the world. Consistently, Neoen had been starting construction on 1 to 1.5 gigawatts of new projects every year, entirely developed in-house, and by now has over 6 gigawatts of operating assets. Now, that's gigawatts. In US dollar terms, the Neoen transaction was $7 billion of equity value, and as indicated in your question, the largest acquisition to date for our renewable power and transition business here at Brookfield. To put these gigawatts into context, Neoen's development pipeline, that's the sum of all of its live development projects around the world, is around 40 gigawatts in total. Peak power demand in France, Neoen's home market, is around 50 gigawatts. So the scale of Neoen's global activities and the opportunity set it is pursuing is very large indeed.
Wow, that is impressive. Jeh, can you provide some broader context for this transaction?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, scale has always been one of the competitive advantages that we have. There's much less competition for large deals, and that allows us to get higher returns. When we're negotiating with shareholders, the fact that we can stand behind billions of dollars of equity gives them certainty that the deal is going to close, and that gives us an advantage. And so often for the larger deals, we don't participate in processes. They are often bilateral because we are one of the only shows in town that could do a deal of that size. And Neoen is a good example of this. It's $6 billion plus of equity for the transaction, and there's very few parties that can deliver that much equity. We've owned a number of large-scale platforms, and what we found is scale allows us to drive growth in the businesses. Areas such as financing, procurement, PPAs, power purchase agreements from our partners, we have advantages because we are able to offer a large amount of projects, and that scale allows all of these areas and companies to do business with us and provide us with preferable terms. An example of this is we did a 10.5 gigawatt deal with Microsoft to provide them with renewable power. That's 15 billion plus of capex. And what's great is now we can take some of these competitive advantages and apply them to Neoen on scale. And that should allow us to really supercharge the returns.
Scale is one of these really underlying fundamental aspects. But what are the other aspects that made it just a good fit overall for both Neoen and Brookfield?
Look, renewables are an area that we are extremely active in. We've owned and operated businesses for many decades, initially in the hydro business, then the wind business, the solar business. Our strategy today is one of creating value at all of our businesses using the lessons we've learned over the years to enhance returns and execute on business plans. Neoen has built up a great business in its own right. They operate in a number of markets that we are underweight today, like France, the Nordics, and Australia. But we do believe a lot of the lessons we've learned in the businesses we've already invested in could also be brought to Neoen, and it should really help with enhancing the business further. Also, I think the timing is critical. Today, we're in this environment where we're seeing very strong demand globally for renewable power. Renewable power is the cheapest form of power generation. And so corporates are very keen to contract renewables. Also, renewables can be deployed quickly. And today, power is the name of the game. So our view is, if you look at the fundamentals, it's an excellent time for renewables. And so investing in a large-scale platform that has been doing it for many years, has operating assets, has a huge development pipeline, we can really enhance that pipeline, help them grow, and do it at excellent returns.
Yeah, Ed, and what about on the Neoen side?
Certainly. So to complement Jeh, we saw excellent alignment very early on with Neoen's management team. Current CEO Xavier Barbaro founded Neoen in 2008 and has led its growth since day one alongside a great team. It was clear that the team is one that already thinks like investors, focused on capital allocation and value, not just gigawatts and volumes, making them a really excellent fit for us. And that exact same management team will continue, is committed to Neoen for the long term, and are fully aligned with the business plan under Brookfield sponsorship.
So Ed, take us behind the scenes a little bit. How did this deal actually get done?
Sure. So to make a general comment first, building renewables is a huge opportunity, but does require a lot of capital. Being a developer in public markets is challenging. It's a constant treadmill of raising fresh public equity to fund that new growth. And if you ever hit a point in the cycle where capital markets are less constructive, it really can create a capital constraint. And here, in the case of Neoen, the anchor shareholder was a French entrepreneur called Jeh Vevaina, who owned a 43% stake. Our team had built a strong relationship with Jeh through the years. We presented many ideas to him and quickly understood that he would want to fund Neoen's growth for as long as possible, but could eventually become capital constrained, as we described, and risk losing control. So when this did begin to materialize in early 2024, we were very well placed to effectuate a transaction quickly and very collaboratively. So we structured the transaction into two stages. First, we acquired a 53% stake upfront. This included Jeh and a few other strategic shareholders. That stage one completed on December 27th, which was great timing for the team, but this really de-risked the investment for us. It meant that prior to launching a public tender offer, we already controlled the company and knew we had appropriate governance to execute our business plan. Then stage two was that public tender offer to acquire the remaining shares from public investors, which successfully completed in March earlier this year. And it enabled Brookfield alongside our partners to acquire a 100% stake and fully privatize Neoen. It was around 12 months from entering exclusivity with the board to conduct our diligence to closing stage two of that public transaction. Of course, we're thrilled with the outcome.
A really significant outcome, as you said, with a lot of different stakeholders of different types and sizes.
Absolutely. That's right.
It's so obvious. We understand intrinsically the thesis around renewables and the long-term play of that. But I think it would be really helpful for those listening to just give some context overall to the opportunity for Neoen and their business against this backdrop of this incredible demand for power, as Jeh alluded to. Now that the deal is done, the fun starts. And so as Brookfield, where are we looking with this business to go forward? What's on the horizon?
Yes, absolutely. Look, in our view, Neoen already has the development pipeline, the capabilities, the team to accelerate growth to 2 gigawatts or more per year around the world. From a Brookfield perspective, we will look to enhance really 3 areas. First is asset rotation. Neoen has historically pursued a build and hold strategy on its assets. In a private market setting, we will recycle capital. What we mean is selling de-risked, operating, long-term contracted renewable assets to lower cost of capital, typically more yield-oriented, financial or strategic buyers, and redeploying that capital into new accretive growth. This, of course, becomes a very virtuous cycle through the business plan. Second one is financing. Now, we did largely mirror the existing capital structure of Neoen day one. This was not a leveraged buyout per se. But over time, with our global lender relationships, we are optimizing the capital structure with things like CapEx revolvers to optimize liquidity and some long-term rated corporate debt as the business grows in scale. Bringing these two initiatives together, asset rotation and financing, we have already transformed Neoen into a fully self-funded business model. That's one that is not requiring ongoing fresh equity injections. And the third one to mention, Neoen is already capitalizing on the benefits of the broader Brookfield renewable ecosystem. So think equipment procurement, our lender relationships, our global corporate offtake relationships, including, for example, our global framework agreement with Microsoft. These benefits of our scale and our experience are quite unique, and Neoen plugged in from day one.
Wow. There's a lot to do. Jeh, it's interesting in this context, how does that business plan sit within the overall context of the sector, this allusion to power demand and the tailwinds that you see overall for the renewable business?
Yeah, look, all our acquisitions involve executing on a business plan. And we at Brookfield have a playbook that we use to execute on it. Neoen is a scale business. It's in new markets, but the fundamentals are exactly the same as all our businesses. So we are very well suited to execute on the business plan, create value, as Ed mentioned, through various parts of the business, including contracting, including procurement, including financing. And I think we're doing it all under a very strong backdrop. To put it all in context, today the demand for electricity is growing very rapidly. AI requires data centers, and data centers need generally green power, and they need to be connected quickly. So we are expecting electricity demand to increase very significantly over the next decade, and renewables should benefit from it very significantly. Also, renewables is the cheapest form of electricity in many parts of the world. When you think about it over time, the levelized cost of solar, for example, has dropped by more than 90% since 2009. So it's very rare to see declines like that. And if that trend continues, we are going to continue to see exponential growth in the space. The amount of renewables in the overall supply is going to keep doubling. And that will change the way we see power and change our approach globally to power. So I think Neoen is very well suited for this environment, is going to benefit from these tailwinds. And we're going to bring a lot to the table to make sure that Neoen is taking advantage of it. They're developing projects at the highest possible returns. They're getting the best contracts. They're moving to the right markets. And I think that's what's going to create value over time.
So with costs coming down and this incredible demand for power, really the only limitation is how fast we can build it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I think the demand right now far exceeds the supply of projects. So it's really about bringing high quality projects to completion as quickly as possible. If we are able to do that, the demand will be there. Corporate off-takers will want to procure the power. Governments will want to procure the power. So it's just very important that we move rapidly to develop these projects. And that's what our customers want. They want the power quickly, given today the demand is very strong for power.
Even if we look at the horizon of renewables over the time that Brookfield has been in this business, hydro was one of the very early places where we entered, but very quickly progressed to wind and solar. And now batteries over the last phase have come into the picture. I get the sense that the thing maybe we don't hear quite as often about is batteries, right? This point about, well, you can always make renewable power when the wind is blowing and the sun is shining, but what about when it isn't? So Ed, can you tell us a little bit more about specifically Neoen's experience and their stake in the battery market?
Certainly, and this is a very important growth avenue for Neoen, who really were a first mover in batteries. So to give a bit more history here, back in 2017, Neoen launched its first so-called big battery, around 130 megawatt hours in South Australia. To put that size into context, that is equivalent to over 2,000 batteries from the average electric vehicle on the roads today. At the time, this was pioneering. The first battery deployed anywhere in the world at this scale on a power grid. And today, Neoen continues to be a leader and is deploying its battery capabilities not just in Australia, but in Germany, Italy, Canada, and more. By now, Neoen really is a global authority and partner of choice in that technology. Now, managing an asset that charges, stores, and discharges electricity is very different to one that just generates. In many of these markets that we mentioned, we are seeing very interesting revenue contracting opportunities for batteries emerge as those markets mature, be it government counterparties or often private tolling agreements with utilities, for example. Now, this enables Neoen to monetize multiple revenue streams across its portfolio. We call it the revenue stack, to enhance profitability and manage risk in a way that is appropriate for our capital.
Jeh, obviously batteries can be one of the next big waves of efficiency and ultimately penetration of renewable power across many different sectors, geographies. Do we see right now as much demand around the battery sector in one region as another? Are there certain regions where it's leading, or do we just see it as an overall big push with the rest of the technologies that Neoen and others are playing in?
Look, we think batteries is a global trend. It's one we're very excited about. We think batteries is going to play a key role in the deployment of renewables. Excess generation from renewables needs to be stored. Otherwise, it could be curtailed. And essentially, batteries provides that role. It plays very much a role in renewables deployment. But what's most exciting about it is how quickly the capital costs for batteries are declining. Over the last 15 years, we've seen the cost go from about 1,200 USD per kilowatt hour down to around 200 USD per kilowatt hour. And so very significant declines. That allows for the rapid deployment and scale up. But what's most interesting is that trend is continuing. We're continuing to see that decline. So if that continues, just as we saw in solar, we're going to see exponential growth in batteries. The other thing is when you pair wind with solar with batteries, you start getting to quite a high capacity factor. And that is going to allow technology companies to start using renewables for their data centers because you can get up to 80-90% capacity factors with long duration, short duration storage alongside wind and solar. Look, we're very excited. Neoen's been a big player in this space. At Brookfield, we also have been investing in storage in other parts of our business in the US, in Canada, in Europe. We think it's a very timely acquisition because we can really enhance what they're doing, and the market is ripe for more storage today.
I find it surprising that the cost continues to go down, especially just given the world in which we're living in more recently. But I'm curious if there's anything that surprised either of you. Is there anything that surprised you as you worked through this transaction and worked with all of these stakeholders over the last year and a half?
Yeah, for sure. I'll offer one perspective, which is public M&A always needs to be managed very carefully. It requires strict confidentiality. And in some instances, this can limit a buyer's access to management and information to complete its due diligence. However, in the case of Neoen, management support, alignment, and really very rapid mobilization of high quality information to facilitate our thorough diligence was a very positive signal and really a diligence finding in itself.
I think whenever we acquire a large scale business, when we really sink ourselves into it, we find a number of positives and negatives, and we have a business plan that we need to execute on. With Neoen, it's early days, but it's very much a similar playbook. As we're digging in, we're finding many things as we expected, many things we like about the business, a few things we need to work on. But overall, it's extremely positive. And I would just say today with the fundamentals where they are, our biggest goal, what we really have to focus on is driving the business plan, making sure all cylinders are firing at the same time. That really has to be our focus. So I wouldn't say it's a surprise, but with scale, this is what you normally see. And Brookfield has to really step in and get the business going and developing. And we're going to find a lot of good things along the way.
That's a perfect place to end. Thank you both. It was great to have you here today. I learned a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Audiation.